My father slid a roof repair loan statement across the dinner table and tapped the monthly payment with his finger. My parents had spent almost all of their savings on my sister Jenna's wedding 6 months earlier, and now they wanted me to cover $512 a month for the next 3 years. Mom called it helping the family. Dad said I was the stable one. Then Jenna, still wearing the bracelet Mom bought for her wedding, shrugged and said, "It's not like you need the money. You don't have a wife or kids." For a few seconds, nobody moved. I looked down at the statement. The original balance was $14,870. The roof had started leaking over the laundry room after a spring storm, and my parents had hired a local company to replace the damaged section. The loan was real. I had seen the tarps. What surprised me was that they had already decided the payment belonged to me. Dad leaned back in his chair. "You can handle $500 a month." It wasn't a question. I asked, "What happens if I say no?" Mom gave me the wounded expression she usually saved for conversations about Christmas plans. "Why would you say no when we need help?" Jenna sighed. "Can we not turn this into a whole thing?" That was the part that almost made me laugh. They had invited me to dinner, put a 3-year debt in front of me, and somehow I was the person threatening to make it uncomfortable. I didn't raise my voice. I asked Dad if I could take the statement home and look over the numbers. He pushed it closer. "There's nothing to look over. I still want a copy." Jenna rolled her eyes, but Mom told him to let me take it. I folded the statement once, put it in my jacket pocket, and finished enough of dinner that nobody could accuse me of storming out. On the drive home, Jenna's comment kept replaying in my head. "You don't have a wife or kids." She said it like my life was an empty room where the family could store whatever expense they didn't want. I was 35, single, and worked as a scheduling manager for a regional distribution company. My job was steady, but I wasn't rich. I owned a small townhouse, drove a 7-year-old Honda, and saved carefully. My family saw the steady paycheck and the lack of children. Maybe they had simply decided the rest mattered less. When I got home, I set the loan statement beside my laptop. I meant to glance at my budget and go to bed. Instead, I opened my banking history. I had always been organized with money because my parents were. They treated every good month like it would last forever and every bad month like someone else would help. For years, that someone had been me. I started with the obvious payments. The $210 transfer I sent my parents on the first of every month to help with utilities. There are 2 lines on my phone plan. The $118 I paid for Dad's truck insurance because his policy had lapsed 2 years earlier and he needed the truck to get to his part-time maintenance job. Then I searched old messages for phrases like, "Can you spot us?" "Just until next month, and we'll pay you back." The list grew faster than I expected. There was $2,760 for Mom's transmission, $3,100 for Dad's dental work, $1,840 when their property tax escrow came up short, a new refrigerator, 2 emergency plumbing calls, 3 months of mortgage payments when Dad's hours were cut during the pandemic. Then I made the mistake of searching Jenna's name. I had paid for 2 of her community college classes after she changed programs and lost part of her aid. I had covered the security deposit on her first apartment. I had paid $225 a month toward her student loan for the last 14 months because she said she and her fiancé were trying to save for the wedding. After the wedding, the payments never stopped. I sat there staring at the last one. It had cleared 9 days earlier. 6 months after a reception with a string quartet, a champagne wall, custom menus, and nearly 200 guests, I was still paying my sister's student loan so she could get established. I had also given her $1,500 as a wedding gift. That wasn't exploitation by itself. Nobody had stolen from me. Every payment had been made because I said yes. That was the part I had to admit. I had trained them to bring me problems after they had already made decisions. I told myself I was preventing late fees, shut-off notices, and family fights. I told myself the help was temporary. I never asked for repayment schedules because I didn't want to sound cold. When a new request came, I treated it like an isolated emergency instead of part of a pattern. By 2 in the morning, I had 7 years of transfers, checks, and card payments in a spreadsheet. The total was $31,482. That did not include birthday gifts, dinners, or normal family things. It did not include the labor I had done around my parents' house or the weekends I spent helping Jenna move. It was only money used for bills, debts, repairs, and emergencies. I checked the total 3 times because it looked too large. Then I added another column, current support. Between the utilities, phone lines, truck insurance, and Jenna's student loan, I was paying $649 every month. The roof payment would have brought it to $1,161. I finally understood why the request had sounded so casual at dinner. To them, it wasn't a new arrangement. It was an expansion of the existing one. The next morning, Dad texted me. "When can you set up the roof payment? First one is due on the 18th. No hello, no question about whether I had agreed. I replied, "I'm reviewing everything I currently pay. I'll talk to you Sunday." He sent back a thumbs up. That response told me he still believed the answer was yes. I spent Saturday attaching dates, amounts, and short descriptions to the spreadsheet. Wherever I had a text or email connected to a payment, I saved it. I was not planning to demand repayment. I just did not want the conversation turned into a debate over my memory. I also checked what would happen if I stopped. My parents were not about to lose their house. Their mortgage was current and they had substantial equity. Dad received a pension and worked part-time. Mom worked 3 days a week at a medical office. Their budget was tight, but they were not destitute. Jenna and her husband both worked full-time. Her student loan payment was inconvenient, not impossible. I was angry, but I did not want to create an emergency just to prove I could. So I made a transition plan. I would not pay the roof loan at all. The utility transfers would stop after the next one, giving my parents 30 days. They would have 60 days to move their phone lines and Dad's truck insurance into their own names. Jenna's student loan payment would stop immediately after the payment I had already made that month. I printed 4 copies of the summary. On Sunday, I went back to my parents' house. Jenna was already there with her husband, Mark. I had not asked for him to come, but I was glad he did because I suspected he knew less about the arrangement than she had implied. Dad looked at the folder in my hand and smiled. "I knew you'd figure it out." "I did," I said. "We sat at the same table. I gave each of them a copy." Mom looked at the first page and frowned. Dad skipped to the last page. Jenna glanced at the total, then looked at me as if I had put something offensive in front of her. "What is this?" she asked. "It's what I've paid toward family expenses over the last 7 years." Dad pushed the pages away. "So now you're keeping score." I started keeping score on Thursday. Mom said, "Families don't hand each other invoices. This isn't an invoice. I'm not asking anyone to pay me back." That quieted them for a moment. I pointed to the section at the bottom showing the recurring payments. "I'm not taking on the roof loan. I'm also ending the payments listed here according to the dates on the last page." Jenna's eyes moved down the sheet. When she reached her student loan, her face changed. "You're stopping that because of what I said." "I'm stopping it because you're married, employed, and apparently comfortable deciding what I need my own money for." Mark turned toward her. "He's been paying your loan." She didn't answer him immediately. That was the first development I had not expected. Finally, she said, "It was temporary." 14 months, I said. Mark looked back at the paper. "You told me your parents were helping with that." "My family was helping." "No," I said, "I was." Dad slapped his palm lightly against the table. This is exactly why people shouldn't write everything down. You can make anything look ugly when you put it in a spreadsheet. I asked him which line was wrong. He didn't answer. Mom picked up the pages again and started reading more carefully. She stopped at the transmission payment, then the dental bill, then the mortgage payments. "We thanked you for these," she said. "You did, and I kept saying yes. I'm not pretending I was forced." "Then why are you doing this now?" "Because the roof loan showed me that you no longer see the help as help. You see it as part of my job." Jenna crossed her arms. "This feels like punishment." I told her honestly that part of it probably was a reaction to what she had said. I had been embarrassed and angry, but the numbers existed before that dinner. Her comment had not created the problem. It had explained it. Mark stayed quiet for most of the conversation. He looked uncomfortable but not angry at me. When Jenna said they could not just absorb another $225 a month, he reminded her that they had recently ordered a new bedroom set. She stared at him. He added, "We can cancel it. It hasn't shipped." That did not make him my ally. He was trying to solve the problem in front of him. Still, it was the first time someone at that table had treated my money as optional instead of available. Dad kept returning to the roof. He said water damage could get worse. He said the loan company would not care about family disagreements. He said he had helped me with my first car when I was 19. That last part was true. He had given me $1,200 for a down payment on a used Ford. I had never forgotten it, and I had probably repaid it in my mind 100 times. I told him I appreciated that help. Then I pointed to the total again. His face tightened. Mom started crying quietly, which made me feel worse than I expected. She said she thought helping each other was what a close family did. I said it was. Then I asked why helping each other had always moved in one direction. Nobody gave me an answer. I left the folders on the table and went home. For the next week, the family reacted exactly the way real families do when there is no clean hero and villain. Dad stopped speaking to me. Mom sent 2 long messages saying she understood why I was upset, but thought the cutoff dates were harsh. Jenna said I had humiliated her in front of her husband. Mark sent me a separate text asking for the loan account information so he could make sure their next payment went through. He did not apologize for Jenna, and I did not ask him to. My aunt called after Dad complained to her. She initially said a roof was different from little monthly bills. Then I asked what Dad had told her about the wedding. She thought my parents had contributed around $10,000. The actual amount was closer to $37,000. That was not what he told me, she said. She still thought my cutoff dates were harsh, but she stopped telling me to take over the loan. My uncle called the spreadsheet corporate nonsense. I asked if he wanted to cover the $512 payment. He said that was not the point. The first real test came when the next utility transfer did not arrive. Mom called that morning. "Did you forget?" "No." She was quiet. I reminded her of the date on the summary. She said she had assumed I would calm down. That hurt more than the anger. Even after I printed 7 years of payments and read the cutoff dates aloud, she had treated my boundary like a mood that would pass. "I'm not trying to scare you," I said. "But I need you to believe me when I say something is changing." She asked if I could send half for a few months. I said no. At lunch, I felt guilty enough to open my banking app. Sending the money would have ended the immediate discomfort. That was my old solution to every family problem. I closed the app. My parents paid the utilities. Nothing was shut off. Nobody lost the house. But choices that had been hidden by my support became visible. Dad had to move the roof payment into the budget. He cut back his cable package and stopped talking about replacing his truck. Mom picked up 1 additional shift every other week. They canceled a fall trip they had been planning with friends. Jenna and Mark canceled the bedroom furniture and started paying her student loan from their joint account. Jenna blamed me for that for almost a month. Then something changed between her and Mark. I did not hear the details from him. Jenna called me one evening and asked whether I had records of any other payments I had made for her. Her voice was defensive but not hostile. I told her about the classes and apartment deposit. She already knew about those. Then I mentioned a credit card payment from 4 years earlier that Mom had asked me to cover after Jenna moved home. Jenna went quiet. What credit card payment? I checked the notes. It had been $1,360. She said Mom had told her dad paid it. That conversation showed me something I had missed. My parents often presented my help as their help. When I paid a bill after Mom called, she told Jenna that we took care of it. When I covered Dad's dental work, he told relatives he had arranged a payment plan. The arrangement protected their pride and made my contribution disappear. It also allowed Jenna to believe she had received less help than she had. She did not apologize that night. She said she needed to talk to Mom and ended the call. 2 days later, my mother called me furious. She accused me of turning Jenna against them by sharing private financial information. I reminded her that it was my payment. She said that was not the point. That phrase was becoming popular in the family. The argument lasted about 10 minutes. Mom denied telling Jenna that Dad paid the card. Then she said Jenna must have misunderstood. Then she said it had been years ago and did not matter. Finally, she admitted she had probably said we handled it because she was embarrassed. That was the first honest thing she had said about the money. I told her I understood the embarrassment. I also told her I would not keep funding a story where my money became someone else's generosity. She cried again, but this time I did not feel like the tears were a weapon. She sounded tired. I didn't think you minded, she said. I didn't know how much I minded because I never added it up. We did not solve everything on that call. Dad was still angry. Jenna was still embarrassed. My uncle thought I was selfish, while my aunt had only partly shifted toward my side. The same evidence produced different conclusions. Some saw generosity. Others saw a responsibility I had accepted and was now abandoning. What changed was that I stopped needing unanimous approval. 60 days after the dinner, my parents moved their phones to a cheaper carrier. Dad found a new insurance policy for the truck. It cost more than what I had been paying, and he made sure I knew that. I said, okay. He waited for me to offer the difference. I didn't. The roof loan stayed in my parents' names. They never missed a payment. There were consequences, but they were ordinary ones. Fewer dinners out, more careful grocery trips, an extra shift, a canceled vacation. Tension between my sister and her husband over what they could actually afford after a wedding they had treated like a finish line. Nobody's life was destroyed. They just had to live inside the budgets they had built. About 3 months later, Mom invited me to dinner again. I almost said no, but she told me it would only be her, Dad, Jenna, and Mark. No aunt or uncle. No family intervention. When I arrived, the table was set, but there were no papers beside my plate. Dinner was awkward at first. Dad talked about work. Mark asked about a new warehouse system my company was installing. Jenna barely spoke. After we finished eating, Mom brought out the old spreadsheet. The pages were bent at the corners and covered in her notes. She said she had gone through every line. A few descriptions were incomplete, but she had not found an amount that was wrong. Dad looked at the wall. Mom said, I still think you could have handled it differently. I told her she was probably right. That surprised her. I could have spoken up years earlier. I could have told them that the monthly help had an end date instead of letting resentment build in private. I could have said no before the total reached $31,482. Being taken for granted did not mean I had handled every part perfectly. Then Jenna spoke. She said, I shouldn't have said you don't have a family. It was not a dramatic apology. She did not suddenly understand my entire life. She added that she had been stressed about money and thought I was judging the wedding. I told her I had judged the wedding. Mark coughed into his hand, hiding a laugh. Jenna gave him a look, then said, "Fine, maybe it was too much." That was as far as she could go that night. Dad finally turned toward me. He did not apologize. He said he had assumed I would help because I always had. "I know," I said. "That's why I had to stop." He nodded once. We did not return to normal, but normal had depended on me paying to keep everyone comfortable. We found something more honest. I still bought my parents dinner sometimes. I gave them gifts on birthdays. When Dad needed a ride after a medical appointment, I took the afternoon off and drove him. But I stopped paying recurring bills. When Jenna and Mark needed help moving 6 months later, I showed up with gloves and a dolly. When she hinted that movers would have been easier, I told her I was offering labor, not financing. She rolled her eyes, but she laughed. The $649 that used to disappear every month now goes into my retirement account and a separate savings fund. I have not decided what that fund is for yet. Maybe a larger home, maybe travel, maybe a future family. For once, nobody else gets to decide. My sister was right about one thing at that first dinner. I did not have a wife or children depending on me, but that never meant my money was waiting for someone else's debt.